All right, my next guest is a solo law practitioner with a local practice. In addition to practicing law, he has worked as an accountant, a department store clerk, a rural postal carrier, a warehouse worker, and a security guard. So he's not just a lawyer, he's had real jobs. I'd like to welcome to the program John James Washburn. Good morning, sir. Good afternoon, sir. Good morning.
One or the other. Thank you, Stephen. I'm glad to see somebody look at my website. So,
Come highly regarded, by the way. Josh Moore has said wonderful things about you, and we like Josh. But I was cruising around in here, and I see a lot of good stuff, and I think we'll try to squeeze some of this in if we can. But because you're a lawyer and you're interested in, and I'll quote you, judicial accountability, that is a subject that I would like to touch on because not a lot of my other guests are going to have insight into that. What exactly do you mean by that?
well, I've had, and I expect a lot of lawyers have had, bad experiences in courts, but lately things seem to be getting worse and worse. There seems to be a certain, to put it as bluntly as I can, arrogance from the bench. I think the other two branches of government really don't have enough oversight. I mean, as an attorney, I can respect the need for an independent judiciary, and I'm not saying that somebody from the other branches has to necessarily look over their shoulder all the time, but I really do think that we need a little bit more accountability. Now, I know, there have been attempts in the past. I know there was an attempt to give the legislature some input into court rules, which sometimes can be, well, I don't want to say controlling, but they're not supposed to have the force of a statute, but sometimes they do in terms of filing deadlines, procedural matters, and it seems like the courts are sort of left on their own to decide how court rules are written. This issue, too, about the appellate process, I mean, I'm not sure how you would streamline it, but I think something has to be done. I had a case recently where, I can't get into the particulars at the moment. It's currently an appeal to the state Supreme Court, and the opinion that was written was simply horrendous. I don't know how else to put it. The judge in question didn't really apply the law, which I thought was pretty straightforward. And the opinion she wrote really didn't follow, I think, what are the guidelines for the proper writing of a legal opinion. And my client, who does not have a lot of money, the Supreme Court agreed to give her a reduced fee, and I'm handling it for a very, very small amount of money, almost pro bono at this point. And I can see the frustration over what should have been a very simple legal matter. I think interestingly enough, too, New Hampshire now has discretionary appeals, where at one time they didn't really have any right to an appeal, then they expanded that. Now they seem to be sliding back into that. But I guess to answer your question, I think we have to explore different avenues in terms of, is there some way we could have a little bit more oversight, perhaps expand, and I know this might not be popular with some judges and members of the legal community, but maybe try to expand the Judicial Conduct Committee, which it seems like it takes an awful long time for them to even handle a complaint. And from what I understand, I've never filed one myself, but from what I understand, it's a very lengthy and somewhat frustrating process, and there doesn't appear to be any resolution on this. I think overall, maybe the legislature should perhaps look at, as I say, exploring avenues of judicial accountability. I wish I had some simple answers while you're saying we could do 1, 2, 3. This frustration that I sense from other people, my clients, even other attorneys, as far as the way the legal system is set up. I mean, even the what I call the lowering of bar standards. At one time, New Hampshire had one of the most difficult bar exams in the country. When I came in from Massachusetts, I accepted the fact that I had to take the New Hampshire bar exam, and I'm proud of the fact that I passed it when it was actually one of the most difficult bar exams in the country. Well, basically the Supreme Court decided that, or the judicial authorities decided we should have reciprocity. And they opened the gates up to attorneys from other jurisdictions. And there was no more requirement that you had to take and pass the New Hampshire bar exam. Then they decided that this wasn't fair to applicants from New Hampshire, because some of these states have lower bar pass scores than New Hampshire. So they lowered the New Hampshire bypass score. And as a result, they basically lowered the standards for bar admission in New Hampshire. And there wasn't a lot of coverage of this, any debate, discussion. It was more or less done unilaterally by the court system.
I can think of two particular cases that I know of where I thought the judge was crazy. Judge John Lewis in his domicile decision, and then recently the Croydon case. I think up and down the Croydon case has been ridiculous because the way I read the law, we already had school choice built in, and it seems that the AG and the state school board and the court system to date has disagreed with what seems obvious. I think
Indeed.
a lot of people are frustrated by that. Because when you can read it as a layman and it makes perfect sense to you, and then a judge says, "Oh no, that's not what it means," everybody's like, "What?"
That's the thing. I mean, a lot of these things they don't have to be that complicated. I mean, sometimes you do need a lawyer to understand them, and sometimes they should be relatively straightforward. Like in the matter I just discussed, I thought it was going to be a relatively straightforward matter, and it's turned into a hopelessly complex matter over. And there's not really any money or anything involved, but unfortunately, I think perhaps something else that maybe we could look at might be an intermediate appellate level like some states have. We just have you're not happy with the decision in a court, so you have to go to the New Hampshire Supreme Court, and that can take a while. So perhaps there should be some intermediate level of review of a judge's decision.
Concealed carry. Should we keep the licensing requirement as it is now, or do you think that's excessive?
Well, in terms of concealed carry, I mean, I basically very strong on maintaining that right. I mean, when you're asking me about concealed carry, are you saying that you're talking about the present permitting process?
Correct.
I mean, I'm actually against expanding it as far as making it more difficult. Mm-hmm. And I could see exploring an avenue of repealing the present concealed carry requirements.
Okay. How about pro-choice, pro-life?
Pro-life.
Okay. Education.
Okay.
Common Core?
Against. And generally against any one-size fits-all education.
Okay.
Because the thing is, I can remember, attending public schools in the 1960s and 70s when they brought in the new math and all the new things. And it seemed to me, I had the opportunity to look at previous textbooks, and it looked to me like they actually covered the subject better. And it seems like whenever the federal government or any central authority comes in and they try to basically dictate terms, and especially this Common Core, where they're talking about basically every jurisdiction in the United States, they're trying to bring, shoehorn into one definition. For example, I can remember in the 7th grade we had these science textbooks, and this was supposed to be the, part of the new education, the post-Sputnik era and all that. And then I saw some of the textbooks that they had used previous to that, and they had much more hard science in them, much more before they decided that, they panicked because the Russians launched a satellite, and they standardized curriculums, whereas before, it looked to me, I think the textbooks and the material was actually taught better before that.
I think it was much more rigorous, I agree.
Okay, at this point, a little programming note. We lost our phone connection at that point in our conversation, so I ended up having to finish the interview on a different day, on a different phone, with a different headset, calling a different number, so it sounds different. But here's the rest of the interview.
Let's talk about voter ID and domicile.
As far as the issue of domicile, yeah, I think perhaps that might be the next step. I know there is a voter ID law that, fortunately, that is enforced, although they seem to have carved out a few exceptions. I know when during the presidential primary, this individual showed up and had a sign claiming that you didn't need any type of photo ID to vote, and the Secretary of State Gardner was there. He went over and spoke to him and gave him a lecture about voting law, and he said, well, no, you still need the ID because you have to sign an affidavit saying that you do have an ID, you just don't have it with you, and you can still be required to produce it. So, I think maybe there could be a little bit more follow-through. As far as domicile, yeah, that's a good question because I know, I've actually had a few cases involving jurisdiction where this has come up between residence, citizen, and domicile can actually be the same or they can be three different things. So this idea of people who, that I realize maybe some of them could be exaggerated, but I don't know about people who, they come here for the primaries, decide that they like New Hampshire and they might want to live here, so they find somebody's address that will let them register to vote, and they vote in the primary of the state that they're not a resident of. So I think maybe there could be more of a domicile requirement, requiring people, say, to be a resident for some period of time, to do something more than just say, oh, I intend to live here. But I don't know if that answers your question.
No, that'll work. My last question is, as you've talked to voters, what is the most important thing to them in 2016?
Overall, I would say it's actually the economy and people just trying to cope in this terrible economy we have. I really don't know what people are talking about when they claim that there's some sort of recovery and everything's getting better. Or even today, somebody at the Fed made some statement and all the stock indexes went real seriously tumbling. It seems like it's just a roller coaster ride. And I know people who've been unemployed for years now. On top of that, I think we do have certain disincentives to work and some really stifling factors that, both the state and the federal government put on people as far as trying to run a business, really just trying to live. I mean, too much of my practice concerns, I didn't intend it this way, but bankruptcies and foreclosure relief, offers in compromise with the IRS. And a lot of these people, it really isn't their own fault. It's just kind of goes to worse. So I'd have to say it's probably the economy.
Okay, great. Well, we've come to the end of our segment. How do people reach out to you if they want to help you in the remaining days to the primary and hopefully on to the general election?
Well, if you live in Merrimack, and you can vote for me. And would you like a phone number? They can call me anytime, and I'll be happy to talk.
Anything you feel comfortable giving out.
Okay. Well, I can. I'll give you. I'll even give you my direct line, 889-2226, and I also have a campaign phone, 320-6713. And you can call me anytime except maybe between the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. But and I also have a website if you're interested, www.electjohnwashburn.org.
All right, sir. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck.
Okay.
The 603 Alliance is hosting world-renowned author Trevor Loudon in Nashua for the New Hampshire premiere showing of the new film based on his best-selling book, The Enemies Within. The premiere showing is next Friday, September 16th, 7 p.m. at the Crown Plaza in Nashua. Tickets are only $10 per person. You can reserve a spot in advance and pay at the door, or you can pay online at 603alliance.org. If you would like additional information about the event or Trevor Loudon, please contact event manager Di Lothrop at 603-864-9287.